Hi, I'm your cult boyfriend, and I'd let the geek get the girl. I would love if I could talk to you about the death of Randy Meeks in Scream 2. Um, you know what? I am very comfortable saying that Randy's death is my favorite horror movie death. And let me try to justify that for you now. If you remember, a few weeks ago, Jacob, Justin, and we got together and we tackled Scream 2 as a group. We talked about the themes of Kevin Williamson, the direction of Wes Craven, and really what makes Scream 2 so incredibly sophisticated at times. Um, we also talked a bit about Randy's death, and right now, this postmodern diatribe that you are currently watching is what was born of that conversation because it's difficult to get in exactly exactly how you interpret a scene in a group setting like that, in a live setting like that. It's difficult to really get your thoughts in order, and sometimes like the true insight comes from watching it back and going, yes, I'm seeing what everyone's throwing down here, and I now understand why it hit me so much. So I'd really just like to wax poetic to really dive into Randy's death. um it's not my favorite death in the sense that it's the most visceral, the most grotesque, or you know, or the most beautifully shot. It's not about that. It's about what that death represents in the larger tapestry of Scream 2 and how that truly adds to the thesis provided by Williamson's script. Um, First of all, I think that Scream as a franchise and Williamson as an artist punishes cinephilia. Randy Meeks being killed like that, that's punishing a cinephile. That is absolutely punishing a cinephile, and much more so. I mean, I guess probably an archetype that I relate to a lot. The neurotic kind of like maybe a little bit like a geeky smartass who's obsessed with film. That's Randy Meeks, and Randy Meeks' archetype in Scream 2 is challenged, humiliated, and belittled before he's ultimately punished by being murdered. Just like how he's supposed to be, just like how that archetype is supposed to die. According to the uh, presets to the preconceived notions of how a slasher movie is supposed to work. The whole thing about Scream 2 and Williamson's script, though, is that it gives you every opportunity, it gives you every reason to assume that that's not going to happen. Scream 2 is really good at subverting tropes, and you always know that it's subverting tropes except when it isn't, right? Randy Meeks is offered so much screen time. The narrative insists on him quite a bit. You even think, I think just like Randy deludes himself into thinking this too, that yeah, the geek could get the girl. He could be with Sydney. This could be Randy's hero's journey or whatever. This could be Randy's time. And then it's of course no. No, fuck you, cinephile. This is not your time. What are you even doing here, Randy? You will never be the leading man, and you will never, ever get the girl. And that is final. That is absolutely final. Scream punishes cinephilia and humiliates cinephiles. It punishes Randy for even thinking that he could be the center of this framework, for even thinking that he's an important factor in the larger narrative, for even thinking for a moment that he could be the hero, that he could be the love interest, or anything other than the neurotic friend who gets killed halfway through the movie. That is who you are. Don't let your worth be inflated by the fact that you accidentally lived through the first movie. You were an afterthought, Randy. They were going to kill you, and then they got distracted, and then they just shot you and thought you were dead anyway. Like you weren't supposed to live through Scream 1. You come back in Scream 2 and you think you're a hero now? What and it also, in a much more meta, contextual way, Williamson is punishing the cinephiles who are watching it. Because, I mean, I think you have to identify with either Mickey or Randy the most if you're a cinephile watching Scream 2, at least from that part of your personality. And I think that Mickey and Randy are great inverses of each other. Mickey's a much darker version, but Randy's not entirely innocent either, but he's as innocent as you can be raised by pop culture. I think that that's necessarily the point there. But he's punishing cinephiles or like real horror fans who know the motions, beat for beat, who know all the different plots, all the plot devices, all of the even the new postmodern flourishes that we're developing in that moment of the late '90s horror scene. Um, the ones who are expecting that hero moment from Randy, because it's telegraphed. Like, it's telegraphed that he's going to have some sort of arc, some sort of romantic arc, some sort of at least heroic one. And it's punishing the cinephile who is watching the film because it's like I believe Jacob said in the discussion, he was talking about Chekhov's guns, and like Williamson gives us a million Chekhov's guns, and I remember saying, yeah, but he always goes for the most used gun and punishes you with it and shoots you right in the fucking face. You're deluding yourself like Randy when you're watching this film as a cinephile, as one who understands like shot composition. That the shots insist on Randy. Randy is set up to actually get the girl or at least survive or do something heroic. He does nothing heroic. He doesn't survive. He doesn't even like get to hold anyone's hand. He gets murdered in the back of a van. It's incredible, and that punishes the cinephile who pays close attention to shot composition and narrative elements like beats and things like that. I think it's incredible, and of course, Randy brings subtext into the text by calling Stu a pussy ass wet rat and Billy Loomis a homo repressed mama's boy. Um, he also lays down the theme pretty heavily of Mickey trying to give people a good show, a good film, a good trial, because Randy goes out of his way to align O.J. Simpson with the likes of Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, which you're not thinking about that in the moment, but afterwards you're like, that's a weird pull. Why would you go there? He's not on that level. That's really weird. But it's to set up the part of the I'm gonna blame the movies, give the people what they want, a good trial. Everyone loves a good trial. That death is momentously important, and that death is my favorite horror movie death because that's the scene in Scream 2 where it goes. We're actually not it's not about subversion anymore. It's not about diverting tropes, right? It's about the fact that you have deluded yourself into believing that that is the new trope. So we're going to do the old trope, but we're going to give you everything that you wanted for, everything that you asked for, everything that you're thinking about. Randy is not the hero of this film. Randy is body count. Randy is the hyper intelligent friend who is kind of antisocial, who has to die exactly 1 hour into the movie. It's fascinating. I like this Scream, the series, the franchise is essentially about cinephiles killing their friends and other cinephiles, and in that moment of Randy being on the phone, it is cinephile v cinephile. There is something so elating, something so incredible about hearing the cinephile. About hearing Randy ask the cinephile serial killer, "What's your favorite scary movie?" back to him after he trolls him with a showgirl's answer. Quite fascinating, actually. The death of Randy Meeks is my favorite horror movie death because it's a death that outright punishes cinephilia. It's a death that outright punishes its own narrative structure. It's a death that beautifully deconstructs arc, like the narrative idea of an arc, or the preposterous idea that anyone can truly have an arc in a slasher film outside of the final girl, or in some '90s cases the killer. Like, it punishes that idea because no, that's not in the cards. That's absolutely not in the cards. Randy Meeks is also one of my favorite horror characters of all time. He's definitely one of the best Scream characters. His only true competition is either with Sidney or with like one of the killers, you know either with like a Jill or a Mickey or a Billy or a Stu. Like, those are his only real that's his only real competition. Randy is a fascinating character, but I love Randy, and I love the idea that Scream punishes cinephilia not just within the film itself, but it punishes the cinephile watching the movie. Which, by the way, in the '90s, everyone's right now everyone's a cinephile. Everybody knows the rules of how to survive a horror movie, at least on the most basic and fundamental level. Like, everybody is pretty well versed in these things. Randy Meekses are everywhere. So it kind of just punishes everyone, but especially that part of culture that is pop, right? That's exactly what it punishes. Um, Randy is fascinating. Not it doesn't just punish cinephiles within the film. It punishes the notion of cinephilia, the idea of watching the film, and I'm gonna blame the movies, of course, because that is the overarching, or at least the most interesting and most '90s motive that Scream 2 offers from Mickey. I'm gonna blame the movies, and you can. Because Mickey being a killer is also punishing cinephilia because you get two options as a cinephile. You either get to be an actor in a movie or you get to be a director. You get to be punished either way though. You get to be humiliated either way. And that's fascinating to me. Randy Meeks, fascinating character. Absolutely fascinating character, and that death is the best death that I have ever seen in a horror movie. Brilliant. Brilliant. And I always think about it. I think about how wonderful it is, pretty wonderfully composed, but that's not what stands out so much. What stands out is, like I said, Randy Meeks as an archetype is elevated in that film only to be challenged, humiliated, and belittled. What are you even doing here, Randy? You will never be the leading man, and you will never, ever get the girl, and he never, ever does.
Great. You know what? Why don't we just talk about Randy dying then? Because he is next.
Yeah, it's
Well,
probably the most like shocking move this movie makes
It's
because he's something of like a mascot for it now, almost more than Ghostface.
Yeah,
Like,
he's one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite deaths, not because of the visceral death itself, but I love the conversation beforehand and the things that this archetype is like pushed through. Um, well, first of all, they're sitting around on a bench, and we get one of my favorite Dewey lines. So I think Dewey is very funny in this movie. Gail calls him a bonehead, so then Gail's phone keeps ringing. So then Dewey, fucking master of wit, goes, "I don't know, phone head." And I'm like, Dewey, that is so witty. That's so charming. Um, but then Randy ends up picking up the phone and it's cool. Cinephile v cinephile. This is fun. But especially the part where his archetype is challenged, humiliated, and belittled before he's murdered, when Ghostface is saying, like, why are you even here, Randy? Like, you'll never be a leading man and you'll never ever get the girl, which gets to Jamie Kennedy's perfect delivery of fuck you. Because like he
yeah,
knows his place. If anyone's meta like as fuck, like as a real person, it's Randy. Like Randy knows. Like he shouldn't live through this. He wasn't supposed to live through the first one.
yeah, I saw the thing where
Lucky.
Jamie Kennedy was talking about it, right? And he was like, honestly, I didn't even know if I was going to be in the second one. Like, it was
Yeah.
very up in the air.
I'm
Like,
so
he had
happy they
no
brought him
idea.
back. This is the most like Jacob always points out to like the traumatic deaths in these movies, and this is the one for me. Like this guy, like
Like an actual, like, good, pretty decent guy who has like some pretty sad backstory, and that like his whole character is that he's just like hopelessly in love with Nev
well, yeah,
Campbell,
and that's
but
also he's like the sequel should have like the nerd fall in love with
but it
yeah.
doesn't.
or the final girl fall in love with the nerd, and it doesn't happen.
No, he just dies for nothing.
Oh,
I mean,
so
it's
often he died in
another
the
case of like playing into the trope in a way that implicates like the audience or it does it feels like it has to happen, but then it feels like so fuck like Scream 1 diverted more tropes than this one did. Like
Mhm.
yeah.
Which I think is its own like kind of reflective element is that.
like it's a painful scene to watch, and not like when he gets pulled into the car and then like immediately like three fucking dudes with a boombox walk by listening to I think a Cottonmouth King cover of Big A Little A. The system might got you, but it won't get me. Fucking Crass
Yeah,
cover. I'm like, what is
yeah.
the significance here? I will refuse to engage with whatever that means, guys.
Uh,
Um,
it's just Cotton. It's a reference to Cotton, the character.
and as it's revealed, like this is the only death like we definitely know who did it was Mrs. Loomis who killed Randy.
Yeah,
It's
Well,
because like but Randy like brings subtext into the forefront. I love it because he's like Stu was a pussy ass wet rat and Billy Loomis was a homo repressed mama's boy. Like,
which
and that's what gets him
I
killed.
yeah, I do like the whole like Freudian aspect to this movie. It's pretty
Yeah.
great.
yes, yes.
I do like when Randy says like maybe it's Hallie and Dewey's like, oh, most serial killers are typically white male. That's why it's perfect. It breaks the rules, but not really. Candyman's daughter. He gets to be blatantly racist.
Yeah, I watched that. I was like, "Whoa, Randy!" Like that's the part of this that I was like,
What do
that
you
is
expect? He's a film
actually
bro
like,
cinephile, dude. He's a film bro cinephile. I love
yeah,
it,
I've never
kids.
met a cinephile that wasn't racist, but
Yeah, right. Like I get
it's
Randy.
like,
He's fine. He's harmless, as Hallie says when Mickey says, "Isn't Randy a killer?" Like
well,
Mickey's like the
I think
inverse
the
of Randy.
conclusion.
Mickey is like the dark version of this cinephile fucking personality. I love it, actually.
Yeah, I would say
But
he's less innocent than we're giving him credit for. I think that's kind of the conclusion of the movie. But yeah,
yeah, but I
definitely.
do love this scene, like seeing Randy go like this, and I had like you build a good bond with him on the first movie because like everyone's. I mean, if Williamson didn't love his characters, he wouldn't let like 5 live each movie. It's a ridiculous amount of people
Well,
alive.
yeah, and each one that died, I was like, are they gonna die? I didn't realize they're gonna die. Of course,
Yeah.
Dewey
Yeah.
had to live.
That's the hardest part of this movie is getting through the Randy death scenes. I'm like, man, this guy brought so much.
I didn't expect it.
They almost set him up as like the new like hero to some extent, or like they set it
Well,
up like he's gonna have his Dewey moment, but then he
Well,
never
it
has his
does
Dewey
focus
moment.
on him quite a bit when he's like
That's what
having
I
to stand
mean.
there while like Derek makes out with his dream girl. And he's
He
like,
gets like quite a lot of screen time and like
yeah,
development through the first half, so it really sets him up as like a central character in it. So it does play it up like the bit is gonna be that the nerd is the hero. It's like they're fake foreshadowing, but no, he just gets
that's kind of
capped.
the idea. They keep constructing like these archetypes and then trying to subvert
They
them. But
keep
then
giving.
not always. You don't know when it's gonna be subverted, when time they're gonna do it, because when they do it, it's just like, oh, okay, it makes sense because it's a horror movie and it's
Yeah,
self-referential. But then when they don't do it, it's like, well, it's because it's like commentary. I don't know. It's a weird
it's
construction behind it.
what it
I
is
love
that
it.
like film students love to like or like suppose love to like masturbate to Chekhov's guns and like foreshadowing and shit. But like this kind of riffs on that because it gives you like 50 guns, like 50
Yeah,
Chekhov's guns, and then only actually follows
But
through on like half of them
but
the most
on
easily
purpose.
available gun though, like the
but when
most
you
used gun.
when you look
Yeah.
at it as like unreliable tropes, it's almost
Yeah.
like once you recognize that, you can still parse together what's actually being foreshadowed. It's interesting.
It's just
To an extent, I didn't the first time I watched it, but the second time I can kind of see
Well,
it's a bit
I've
better.
only seen it once, and I'm telling you
Yeah,
that
like
I felt
it's
I felt for the
brilliant,
bits
man.
a lot.
When Randy picks up that phone and immediately Ghostface is like, have you ever felt a knife like enter into your body and like scrape the bone beneath? And like Jamie Kennedy fucking is a much better actor than his career or he or anyone would give him credit for. That scene is so well done on his end. And when the cinephile asks the cinephile serial killer, what's your favorite scary movie, back to him, I'm like, okay, man, we're in for a blast, because they only do in Scream 4, like they call a cinephile again, and they have like a conversation reminiscent of this one. Um, good God, I love that Randy death scene. I'm like kind of nerding out over here because it's like perfect. It comes right at hour into the movie. It's awesome. It's just awesome. Jamie Kennedy was awesome. Randy was a great Scream character, and fuck, man, this is like the one death that actually makes me sad in the movie. The rest of it, I'm fine with, honestly.
Yeah.
I
This
think I
was the
agree with
one that's
that.
like,
Yeah.
oh fuck, that's like the good part of me dying. Now I'm just with Mickey now.
I do think it like presents pop culture and media in general as like a reactive
Yeah.
force.
Yeah.
Which is also why I think it's like sympathetic to movies, because I think it implies that movies are only reacting to things and like trying, like reacting to cultural forces or like,
Well, yeah, and in
forces that
that
are
way,
already
it tries
there.
to answer the question of like, do movies shape culture? Does culture shape movies?
Yeah, because like that's why again like to use like the like I if like movies are the kid, it's just trying to make its parents happy by giving them what they want.
See, that's
So
perfect way of putting it. Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of how I thought of it, was that like no, like people are
Mickey
just
does say that. I'm
bloodthirsty
just
and
trying to give the
horrible.
audience what they want. Everyone loves a good trial. It's like theater.
They
Just trying to
do
give them what
like
they want.
we saw that recently. Like people love that shit,
Hell, we wanted that shit watching the sequel. Good movie,
They
Mickey.
they reference OJ in this too, and like
Mhm.
sure, before he dies, Randy calls OJ, like kind of implies that OJ is in quotes, one of the great killers, you know?
Oh,
Like he
yeah.
puts him up with like Ted Bundy and shit. He's like OJ, like OJ was this like exemplar serial murderer, like. But I
Well, we
think
know
they do
Randy
that
was.
on purpose to like put the trial in your head for later.
Yeah.
I think that's like one of their Chekhov things is like there's a lot of like references that are later kind of made more complex by stuff that happens. But
Do I think that
Like,
media can? I think media definitely can influence people, but at the
I think
same
that like
time,
Williamson does it in like a large way. Like whenever I say that, like people think I'm directly saying that like Scream did Columbine. Like no, not at all. Like Scream showed like cultural attitudes of a group of people. And
yeah,
if you
that
don't
was
think
that
that
was
like
yes,
yeah,
I agree.
and if you don't think that like film influences your life, then I'm not really sure what you're doing watching
Well,
a
if
movie.
if film
Maybe
doesn't influence your life, I don't want to have anything to do with film.
exactly. I'm not saying it influences you to become uh, a psychopath or anything like that, but like
Well,
you start to
I
think
would
of your life.
argue that like school shooters and the likes, like serial killers, like there's something like I feel like they're those people regardless of like films and stuff. But
Well,
I think
even if we like move beyond like the hyper literal school shooter thing, I think we just think of our lives in cinematic terms sometimes. Like we
yes,
treat romances like they're soap operas sometimes, like without us even knowing it, because we have cinematic expectations of reality.
well,